So ABC's Roseanne Reboot delivered massive ratings that we haven't seen on broadcast TV in a while. Roseanne was revolutionary in the sitcom world when it first came out in the late 80s. But after almost 21 years, the show has made a triumphant comeback, and the show is dominating the news cycle. And things are really moving quickly with North Korea, which is very unusual for the Hermit Kingdom. Well, North Korea's dictator Kim Jong-un made a surprise visit to China last Monday, and it was also announced late last night that Kim Jong-un and South Korea's President Moon Jae-in will meet for the first time on April 27th. And this will pave the way for discussions between Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump. The meeting between Trump and Kim is expected to be around May. So would North Korea really abandon their nuclear aspiration this time around? We'll analyze it. Hi, I'm Michael Wan, your host for Michael Wan's Op-Ed Live, and this is Jeffrey Prang, LA County Assessor, who is also very busy for his re-election campaign. Our show, Op-Ed Live, is not about left or right. It's about what's right or wrong. So, Jeffrey, how is your campaign going?
I think the campaign is going really well. It's very difficult running in a county as large as Los Angeles with 11 million people, but I'm very pleased with the support that I'm getting from organizations, from individuals. U.S. Senator Kamala Harris is backing me. I think that I have a very good story to tell the people of LA County about how we've transformed this office to make it a more effective public agency, and I'm looking forward to the election, and I think that the people will agree that we've done a good job.
That's great. Your article came out a couple of weeks ago.
Yes,
and
thank you very much.
There was a lot of good response about it.
I appreciate that very much.
I'd like to tell you that. And many of us remember the late 80s to mid-90s popular sitcom Roseanne. Roseanne is a sitcom that was originally broadcasted on ABC from 1988 till May 20th of 1997. The show was lauded for its realistic portrayal of a working-class American family. The star of the show is, of course, Roseanne Barr, and it revolves around the Connors, an Illinois working-class family. Well, after 21 long years, the highly anticipated reboot of Roseanne premiered on Tuesday night, and the result was a huge success. The ratings are in, and 18.2 million viewers tuned in to watch the politically charged show. It was so successful that the New York Times, according to the New York Times, President Donald Trump reached out to Roseanne Barr to personally congratulate her on her huge ratings, and he also thanked her support of him. So this is what the Hollywood website, Deadspin, said about the show. Roseanne Revival's huge debut stuns Hollywood, and it also prompts soul searching. So did you watch the show, Jeffrey? And do you agree with Deadline's headline?
I did not watch the show. I was not home, and I didn't DVR it. I don't know that I totally agree with that. I do think that there is something different. It's a very interesting dichotomy that Roseanne in the 80s, in the 90s, was actually a very plain-spoken
liberal, right?
Liberal, and she
blue-collar liberal, right?
Blue-collar liberal. She was a very early supporter of LGBT rights, and she was a pretty strong advocate. Her support for Donald Trump shocked a lot of people in the Democratic Party and the liberal community. I think primarily because she didn't do a particularly good job of articulating why she supported him, other than what I think was common in a lot of parts of this country. People were saying, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore, and we're going someplace else because someplace else is different than where we've been. And I think that disappointed a lot of people who saw her as a role model, as a spokesperson, and it's caused some political dynamics in the release of her show.
But I think Roseanne, when she first announced that she will support Donald Trump, I understood it because her show Roseanne, if you think about it, it started from 1988 until 97. It was about an Illinois blue-collar family. So aren't they portrayed like working-class Democrats in the show? I don't know whether they're registered Democrats or Republicans in the show. They never mentioned it.
They never mentioned the party. I think you could deduce that they were working-class Democrats.
Yeah, so like working-class Democrats. Yeah. So you know that this time, back in November of 2016, a lot of working-class Democrats, blue-collar Democrats, did vote for Donald Trump. Like 8 million Obama voters went for Trump. So I think Roseanne touched that sentiment. And
she did.
And I think Roseanne...
But there was a difference between them. They not only were working class Democrats, which sometimes have a tendency to be more socially conservative. Roseanne and her family were not socially conservative. They were social liberals, in addition to being working class.
You're talking about the LGBT rights, LGBTQ
I would
rights.
say the whole...
She was probably the first...
she was
the first show that introduced...
Yeah, she was.
Like lesbian,
and she was very popular with the LGBT community before she even got that show. But I think she was involved in the spectrum of progressive issues.
So I think when I didn't see the entire show either. I just saw snippets of it, some highlights of the show. So there's a line, and she also came out on Jimmy Kimmel's show, I think a couple nights ago. I watched that, and she mentioned that she doesn't want Mike Pence, the vice president, to be president. And and she was talking to Jimmy Kimmel. Hey, do you want him as president? Donald Trump is much better. That kind of line. I mean, that's what she was implying, that Trump is much better than Mike Pence. So I don't see her as a conservative. She is not a conservative, but I do see her as a pro-Trumper. I think there's a line. There's a clear line between being pro-Trump and being a pro-conservative or pro-Republican.
There is a difference because there is an assumption by some, and I think it's totally disproved, that somehow or other he is a moral man. That he is
Donald Trump?
Donald Trump.
He is not a moral.
But
I mean,
he's not. But the Roseanne is somebody who is much more progressive on, I believe, on those issues. Donald Trump gives lip service to some of those issues. Mike Pence lives and breathes those issues. So I can see how she would differentiate between the two.
Yeah, but Donald Trump, I think you have issue about his position about the LGBTQ and...
No, I have issues on Donald Trump on a whole range of
things. Okay, so I think Roseanne supported Donald Trump because of the economy issue and the trade deal issue and the working class. The working class, they did this kind of sample about Illinois working class. They started the show in 1988, right? So their income, their median income, even if you don't put inflation into consideration, their income got even lower than what they used to earn back in the late 80s and early 90s.
That's common throughout the country.
So I think those angry voters came out and voted for Trump, and I think Roseanne understood.
I believe that is the point.
Mentality.
Angry voters. People were angry because they've seen the wealthy getting wealthier. They've seen middle income and lower income wages stagnate. They've seen jobs shifted overseas. I don't believe that people were as focused on individual policies of foreign policy or trade as you represent. I think they were just frustrated with the fact that their dollars weren't going as far as they used to, that the opportunity that they saw their parents move up in class wasn't being applied to them. And I think working class people were frustrated, and Donald Trump, I think he very inarticulately spoke to that, but he spoke to it in a very raw, simplistic way that resonated with people, and I think Roseanne went along with him.
Yeah, and what I think is Roseanne being pro-Trump or not necessarily a pro-Republican is Trump, he came out as an outsider. I mean, even Republican establishment didn't like him either. So Roseanne, I think she understands, I'm talking about the people probably who are involved in manufacturing. I think we touched on that before. People who worked in the manufacturing area who lost a lot of their jobs, and I think Roseanne understands where they stand. So I think this show is probably.
I won't give her that much credit. I will say that she understands how they feel. I don't know that she understands those policies.
You're saying so a lot of liberals got disappointed when Roseanne announced that she would endorse Donald Trump.
Because she had been an advocate on gun rights, on women's issues, on a whole series of progressive issues.
But
to see her suddenly...
This is what I think. When people say that Trump is anti-gay, anti-female, I don't see that. I mean, I consider myself an independent. I was a supporter of Obama and Bill Clinton in the past. I paid very close attention to his rallies because I would try to watch all the candidates' rallies. I mean, not everybody had rallies, but I try to go to YouTube and watch every single one of their speeches because that's where I can understand where they're coming from. And Trump, I mean, to me, I don't think he was inarticulate. I think he was articulate about his views. He was the one who brought these big issues to the table. I mean, nobody talked about trade deals.
He talked about trade.
Only him and Bernie Sanders, right?
I don't
trade
think,
deals and immigration. Nobody brought this to the forefront like Trump did, and he talked about illegal immigration and also environmental regulations that are not just environmental regulation, but environmental regulation to such an extent that it hurts American jobs. So I think it tapped to.
I believe that Donald Trump,
the heartland of America.
When it comes to public policy during the campaign, Donald Trump spoke with the sophistication of a sixth grader. Compared
You're talking about his vocabulary or something?
No,
like
I'm
that?
talking about his understanding and depth of the issues. He spoke about trade in a way that he says they're taking our jobs, and people say, "Yeah, we don't want to take our jobs," but that's as deep as he got.
But he got a much better deal with South Korea. I'm from South Korea,
right.
And he said we have to change this whole trade deal issue because of the trade deficit that America has, facing almost virtually all the countries around
right.
the world. So he was trying to fix it, and with South Korea, he slapped 20%, 25% tariffs on steel and 10% on aluminum. Right? You remember that? Mm-hmm. He decided to give them exemption, but in exchange. America can export more automobiles to Korea from, I understand, from 25,000 to 50,000, and America was successful also put a cap on the export of Korean steels. Those
are all.
So I think this is real change, right?
Those are all details that sometimes Trump has some advisors that are able to impact him. Trump's view of policy is simple. Export deficit is a problem. Slap on tariffs and walk away. Somebody else probably convinced him. Well, sometimes there has to be a give and a take. Sometimes it can't be a one size fits all. I don't think he's capable of thinking that deeply.
I think you think of Trump as a very low level, low intelligence.
I do think of him as
low IQ person, right?
Maybe not low IQ. I think he's very simplistic.
I see Trump in a completely different line. I see him as a masterful politician. Sorry, Jeffrey. I see him that way. I think that you can't be an idiot and win as an outsider within 18 months. How can you do that?
You are incorrect there. You can. Sometimes the idiot savant is able to convey
an idiot has a good aide or a campaign manager, probably. I mean, many people dismissed George W. Bush as an idiot. You understand that, right? Mm-hmm. On the Democratic Party, the liberal side, they thought George W. Bush is an idiot. They portrayed him that way. And if you go to YouTube, there are some clips where you can kind of question his intelligence and all that. And that Karl Rove was behind him. You know that story. But in Donald Trump's case, I don't think there was a huge, tremendously, impact. Somebody who had tremendous impact on his campaign. I think it was pretty much Donald Trump himself.
I believe it is Donald Trump, but it's situational. It's not because he devised a brilliant plan. It's not because he's a brilliant politician. He took advantage of a time in this country when there was frustration, and he speaks in a simplistic way. And he is by accident having some successes, resonating in some crowds, but it is by no means a devised, intelligent, thoughtful manner. His methodology of governing will work for him for a brief period of time. It doesn't work very often, and it's by accident, not by any grand plan.
But don't you have to give him credit if you said he tapped into Americans' anger, right? So he did that then. Nobody saw. Then everybody else could have done it, but he's the one. He's the only person who tapped into that anger, and he got elected president.
I don't believe
62 million votes.
I absolutely reject tapping into people's anger for governing our.
But he was. You're saying. I'm trying to understand your point of view.
Sure.
So you are saying that Donald Trump was manipulative.
He is manipulative. Yes,
right?
absolutely.
That's what you're
absolutely.
saying. Then how can you say? Well, he was very.
Some of it by accident, because he's not smart enough to be that manipulative. To be manipulative, you have to be somewhat wily.
But he tricked 62 million people. Then, according to you, right?
He did something that politicians in this country don't do. He tapped into people's worst feelings and emotions. He said things are wrong, and I'm going to come out swinging and make it better. He did not tap into people's better angels. He did not make any effort to bring people together. He used Mexicans and minorities as scapegoats. It was a divide and conquer methodology that tapped into a lot of people who were feeling frustrated, who voted with emotions as opposed to to what is best for this country and best for public policy.
Okay,
I believe that's what I believe.
Okay, so we're being a little bit sidetracked. We started with Roseanne, so
Right,
I wanted to go back to Roseanne. So, do you agree with the fact, which I do, what I'm about to say? Do you agree when I say most of the Hollywood shows lean left, and most of the sitcoms they do lean left, and most of the TV show when I turn it on, whether I go Netflix or even most programs, entertainment programs, they are more liberal than conservative. Do you agree with that?
I don't watch a lot of sitcoms. I don't know.
I mean, culture in general. I'm talking about even American movies, Hollywood movies.
Well, I think it's not a secret that many people, many leading actors in Hollywood, many leading producers and executives tend to be more progressive.
Right.
So I think that's just a matter of fact.
So I think Roseanne became such a huge hit. Well, what is it, like 18.2 million? It's the highest rated show, sitcom in 6 or 7 years, something like that. That's what I read.
Well, it's only had one show, but
yeah, it's a first, premiere show. So what I think is, I checked the area, which area viewed Roseanne a lot. It didn't do that well in LA and New York. It did best in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I used to live in Oklahoma. Sure. I told you, I used to live in Edmond, Oklahoma, so I know how they think. So they were pretty much starved for this kind of show. They wanted to watch a show where a sitcom or an entertainment show, any kind of entertainment show that doesn't, look down on them, that does not dismiss their values. And I think Roseanne was probably the first show that they thought that at least they didn't portray a pro-Trumper in a stupid light, which I think they did with Fuller House. Did you watch the Fuller House? Full House reboot. No. Fuller House. They dismissed Donald Trump like a crazy guy. Throughout the show. But you have one character, the main character, Roseanne, standing up for Trump, and a lot of people like it. And I think the viewers came out for this show not because they're conservative or Republicans, but I think there were a lot of pro-Trumpers who wanted to watch this show, because I understand.
I think what happens too often in this country, which I think which I believe is a problem in the body politic, is that too often we all retreat to our corners. Mm-hmm. So Roseanne, who used to be supported by the left, declared for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. People will spend their time, apply their values to their watching time. So liberals aren't going to watch it. People on the right side saying, hey, we want somebody who's on our side, so we're going to watch it. So it's that happens in all types of areas. It happens with the food that we buy, the stores that we shop at, that if the left doesn't like it, the right will go there. If the right doesn't like it, the left will go there.
So do you think Roseanne would, this reboot will be such a groundbreaking show that other shows will follow? Like there are going to be more shows that is like Roseanne, that pretty much plays down the middle if you think about it. Because there's also a character, Aunt Jackie. Yes. Aunt Jackie. She's a huge Hillary supporter in that sitcom. So, do you think there will be more shows like Roseanne? Since it's a huge hit.
I don't know. It's too early to tell. You can't really judge something by its first. We're gonna have to wait for a few shows to see if that maintains it. But at the end of the day, the folks in Hollywood are about making money and increasing viewership. So if it's successful, and they see that there's a model, I presume that they will take a look at those.
Well, sometimes I even doubt that. Sometimes I think even though they can make money, they can generate money through some conservative-leaning shows, they purposely, consciously don't. Because even back in, you remember Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson movie? Did you watch it?
I did.
I watched it too, and it's a conservative movie. I mean, many people viewed it that way. Many evangelicals came out.
I just thought it was a bad movie.
You thought so? But many evangelicals went out to watch it. I believe many conservatives went out to watch that. But there weren't a lot of, it didn't make a trend. I think it was just that movie only. Yeah. Other than that, it didn't make a trend. I think with Roseanne, I don't know whether it can make a trend to make a little bit, conservative-leaning shows, because there was an ABC show last year that was canceled, starring Tim Allen, named Last Man Standing. Do you know that
yeah,
show?
I didn't watch
That's also a conservative show, and it had pretty high ratings, but they still canceled the show. I think because Trump won the presidency. If Trump didn't, I think the show probably might have went on. And I think people are tired of that double standard. They are very. I mean, of course, Hollywood being in LA, of course, the coastal areas are always going to lean blue, right? I mean, for now, it doesn't seem like it's going to go red for a long, long time. But so they lost, the Hollywood people lost touch with middle America, heartland America. And I think Roseanne touched upon that. And that's why 18.2 million viewers came out and watched the show.
I think certainly the show did speak to the civic divide throughout this country at the moment, but with any show, whether it's success, many different types of programs can have a one-night success. And this one may very well continue to be successful. We don't know yet, and whether it continues to be a statement between left and right remains to be seen. But I do believe that a lot of these Hollywood corporations, which many of them are public corporations and have responsibilities to the shareholders, if they see that there is a money-making path,
that they would go that way.
Some may not, but there's a lot of companies, so some may. So it's just like you see in talk radio.
So you were a councilman for West Hollywood.
That's right.
So do you know personally a lot of Hollywood people? I would think that you would know
I've
some.
met some. You would
Aren't
think.
They all liberals and Democrats?
No, they're not all. They're not all liberals and Democrats, but more of them are than not. But you would think that I would know a lot of them. But we had a number of particularly more newer, up-and-coming actors that lived in West Hollywood, and I know a few. I can't say that I'm pals with anybody.
So you think this is just just one show that would probably?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'm saying that we can judge this one show based on a lot of criteria, but and perhaps it will be successful for the first couple shows. But we'll see. Is she as funny? Is the show as funny as it was 20 years ago? I thought it was a funny show 20 years ago. I used to watch it sometimes. And if it's going to sustain itself, it's going to have to come up with a mode of operation that's successful.
So I always wanted to ask this question. You consider yourself a liberal, progressive liberal, right? So
Yes.
I know a lot of my friends who are progressive liberals. They tell me that Trump seems to be anti-gay. I don't see it that way. Do you consider him that way? Why is it?
Well, I don't.
I mean,
so there's two ways to judge him. One of them was before he ever ran for president, he seemed to have some LGBT people around him.
One of his closest aides was gay.
Didn't seem to bother him, but his attacks on transgender people in the military, I think, clearly is done with.
But isn't that more of an economic issue? Because one person for the medical bills, because they have to take shots continuously. I heard that it mounts all the way up to what? $130,000 or something like that. So it's.
I think that's a specious argument. What we do hear from coming out of Washington is Mike Pence is a rabid homophobe, and he is driving.
But we're not talking about Mike Pence. That's why Roseanne is against Mike Pence.
No, but Mike Pence is not just sitting in Washington twiddling his thumbs. He is actively engaged in pushing public policy, and on the issue of transgenders in the military, he has inserted himself into that discussion with General Mattis and is pushing that policy very heavily. So Trump listens to Mike Pence, and
but you know what Donald Trump said about gay marriage, right? During his campaign, one reporter asked him about it, and he said it's already settled in the U.S. Supreme Court. Then I don't think there could be any argument that he's against gays. If you read his book, Art of the Deal, I didn't finish the book, but there are parts of it, and one of his closest friends seemed to be gay, and he said he didn't know it. I mean, he mentions it in his process, but
what his personal issues are and what his public policies are different. He is driven by the right. He is listening to Mike Pence. His attacks about transgender.
Do you think he listens to Mike Pence? I think he just listens to himself. That's what I think.
Mostly to himself, but he doesn't mean he's not influenced. He's one of those people that who oftentimes will take the advice of the last person he spoke with. Mike Pence is telling him, your base wants you to be more aggressive toward LGBT people. He proactively sent out the tweet saying, I'm getting transgender people out of the military. And if he's hiding behind cost, then that means he's supporting humanity.
I want to know your opinion, Jeffrey, about him saying that it wasn't his decision. His military,
that's a lie.
Defense Secretary,
I believe that's a lie.
Jim Mattis, and those people recommended him to ban it. What do you say? And also because of the money issue. Do you agree? I mean, when he says it's not about just discriminating against LGBTQ. I mean, it's not about LGBTQ. This one is about transgender. So he's saying that it's not about discriminating against transgenders, but it's more of an economical decision, and also the military seems to not like transgenders being in the military because of those exact precise reasons.
So I believe that Trump's statements were a lie. I believe that is untrue. One, the military under Obama, who administered the transgender rights, they didn't have any objection. They said they could fold them into military service with no problems. Trump, in his tweet saying he's going to take transgenders out of the military, said that's what his commanders wanted. But when his commanders were asked about it, they all tiptoed around it and said, "We'll do what we're told." But none of them said, "Yeah, we got to get them out of here."
You think that decision was made by Trump himself?
I believe that was one of those decisions where Mike Pence had influence over Trump.
Okay, that's you're pretty much guessing, right?
He made, of course, because he doesn't tell us. We have to. That's all we can do in this case.
I can see your point of view. I can see your point.
That's all we can do in this case is speculate. And I believe that there's a fundamental flaw in saying it's too expensive. It's too expensive to treat people humanely and equally. I think that's a horrible argument. We need to treat everybody with equity, with humanity. And we don't say, I can't give you your rights because it's too expensive.
Okay, I understand. So you're saying that medical costs shouldn't be an issue here. It's more about human rights.
This is an equality issue.
Rights.
If they are equal American citizens, they should be treated as equal American citizens in all walks of life in America.
What's the percentage of transgender people in America right now?
It's probably tiny.
There
is an estimate, and nobody's demonstrated this. There's an estimate that maybe 10% of the population may be LGBT, and of that 10%, a part of that is transgender. It's a relatively small number.
Okay, so I think Roseanne Barr. I mean, this is the issue that people raised to me, that they thought that Roseanne Barr is such a LGBTQ. Supporter, like she was one of the prominent ones, right? At least back in the 80s,
very early,
very prominent.
Yes.
And why is she all of a sudden backing Donald Trump? But what I think is, can't she also change her views over time? Can't people change their views over time?
Of course she can. Anybody can change their views, but if you want the support from the people who supported you under your previous views, if you change your views, you can't be disappointed if they decide they're not going to like you anymore.
And everybody knew that Roseanne was a very politically charged figure.
She ran for president.
She ran for president back in 2012, and she said she's going to probably run again in, I don't know, 2020. I don't think 2020, but probably 2024. Okay. So I think this Roseanne show is a positive thing. That's why so many conservatives are so excited about it. It was the top news on the Drudge Report yesterday, whole day long, and I went to a Deadline, and top 7 of the news were all related to Roseanne. So it seems like it's creating a lot of buzz. But let's see how it goes.
Right.
Okay, we move on to our next topic. North and South Korea will hold their first summit in more than a decade on April 27th. The issue at hand is whether North Korea will denuclearize itself. The two Koreas had agreed to hold a summit at the border truce village of Panmunjom. And last Monday, Kim Jong-un traveled to Beijing for a secret meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping for the first time. It was the first time for Kim to have set foot outside of North Korea since he took power in 2011. So what's your thought on this, Jeffrey?
Well, it's been very concerning about the danger and the risk coming to stabilization and peace coming out of the Korean Peninsula since Kim Jong-un came to power. So I think it is positive that there is constructive engagement. The Chinese have a unique ability to reach the North Koreans. It is important that they remain engaged. I will say there's not many things that President Trump has done that I think have merit, but even a broken clock is right twice a day.
But you don't give him credit for making this meeting happen, the summit?
No, I do believe, I do. I will give him credit for that, because I think that, and I am not by any means an expert in diplomacy, but I think the heavy preconditions that to occur before a meeting takes place sometimes means that meetings just never take place. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a meeting take place to begin conversation, and then you can establish your preconditions after that. But part of diffusing tension requires communication. So I think this, and if all it takes to convince Kim Jong-un to disarm is feeding his ego with a meeting with the President of the United States, I think it's a price worth paying.
Do you believe Kim Jong-un when he said he's ready to get rid of the nuclear weapons?
I think he and his father...
That's what he said, right?
I believe he and his father and grandfather have demonstrated that you can't really trust anything that they say. However, it is what we have available to us right now to proceed. If there's a chance that maybe he will, if he's willing to disarm to get a little bit more rice to feed his people, then we should pursue that in the interest of regional peace.
So this is what John Bolton, John Bolton becoming the incoming National Security Advisor for Donald Trump. So this is what he said the day he was announced, the day when Donald Trump announced that there will be a meeting with North Korea in May. He said that we should get rid of North Korea's nuclear weapons, Libya style. Back in 2011, I think that's how Libya, Gaddafi gave up their nuclear weapons, and I heard that that weapon is now in New Mexico, buried somewhere or something like that. So what do you think about that? Is it realistic? Do you think North Korea would voluntarily give up their nuclear weapons like Gaddafi did?
I don't know. I think there's a level of paranoia in that government that's very difficult to judge. The North Koreans have demonstrated themselves over decades that they don't play in the same sandbox as the rest of us.
Right.
But at the same time, not engaging with them is not going to make things any better. We have to continue to try to explore avenues that will allow us to have constructive relationships to make the Korean Peninsula safer not only for Americans but for the South Korean people, their Japanese allies, and frankly for the world. So if he's willing to, if he says he'll give up his nuclear weapons in exchange for trade,
yeah, I think that's what he wants, investment.
I believe
there were some reports about that.
We keep hoping. He's a young man. We keep hoping that he will see that there's that his country has needs, and his past history of using aggressive behavior isn't working, and maybe he's open to a new route. But we don't know that until we talk to him.
So denuclearization, do you think it will happen one day in North Korea, or is it just a wishful thought? Eventually,
I couldn't even speculate. At the moment, it's a wishful thought. We need to continue to push for denuclearization, and hopefully this change of heart by Kim Jong-un will provide us that window.
What do you think about the summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un? I mean, there's going to be a lot of cameras out there. What do you think is going to happen?
It is. We're dealing with two.
For you, it's two idiots meeting each other, right? That's how you view it. Right?
Well, I don't know if they're both idiots. One of them, I believe, is a savvy thug. The other one is an unsavvy thug.
The savvy thug being Kim Jong-un.
Okay. I think so. It is. But sometimes, as I said earlier, sometimes a broken clock is right twice a day. So let's hope maybe that they can get in there and accidentally fall into something that's good.
Yeah, Jeffrey. I mean, I have to break it to you. I think Trump is doing a great job in the economy. I think the economy's done really well last year.
What's he doing in the economy?
Deregulation and also pressuring the trade deal issues about NAFTA and South Korea and China and also.
So let me ask you about the deregulation.
I mean, look at the stock market. You know what happened to the stock market. And did you check the GDP?
But let me ask.
Fourth quarter, 2.9%, and 3.2% in the third quarter.
Are the regulations that he eliminated that allow coal companies to dump sludge into rivers and streams? That's a good regulation.
About environmental issues.
What about the regulations that allow Wells Fargo to continue to
So you consider
getting rid of the oversight of the regulations that clamp down on Wells Fargo when they're cheating their customers. Those are the good regulations to get rid of?
What do you think about
the ones that are making it easier for pharmaceutical companies to take advantage of Americans?
What do you think about America pulling out of Paris Accord? You were against it?
Yes, it was.
Why is that?
Because we are dealing with one of the worst crises in world history.
I read the accord. And to me, it's a very unfair deal for America. The reason is, like for instance, India and China, these countries don't even have to abide by the rules up until 2030. Then we get to lose all our jobs to those countries.
So let's not talk about the Paris Accord because you've read it and I have not. So I can't talk to you about that. Let's talk about regulations. When businesses talk about the regulations they want to get rid of disclosure. The oil companies, the fracking companies don't want to tell you about the poisons they're putting into our drinking water. The pharmaceutical companies don't want to negotiate, don't want regulations dealing with how they reveal what's in their drugs and what their pricing plans are to deal with Americans. The coal companies don't want regulations that restrict what they can do with the poisons, the toxins, and the metals that come out of the earth. Those are the regulations he's getting rid of.
So Jeffrey, I think you raised good points. Environment is very important. I want to drink clean water. Everybody wants to, but I sometimes.
But it's also
I sometimes wonder whether the regulation is stiffened to such an extent that it makes us lose our jobs. You understand what I'm saying? I think we were over-regulated. I think the businesses were, if I talk with the business people here, they were saying, even during the Obama era, they were saying they're over-regulated. So it's hard to even start a business.
Depends on who you're talking to. I'm a taxpayer. Do I want Wall Street controlling? Look what they did. The Wall Street sent us into a near depression in 2008 because there were no regulations over subprime mortgages. Today, Wells Fargo screwed office holders, our customers, because there were not sufficient regulations. The Republicans want to take those regulations away.
Okay, sometimes regulation could be a good thing, and sometimes I think it can be a bad thing. For instance, like what was that? The Glass-Steagall Act. I don't know whether you know that.
Glass-Steagall?
Oh, Glass-Steagall Act. There's a Glass-Steagall Act.
That was a great.
Because of that, a lot of community banks disappeared. You know?
Glass-Steagall ensured that big Wall Street banks and the neighborhood banks were not the same thing.
I think whenever Trump rises up, we tend to go here and there. But but regarding let's go back to North Korea. What do you think we should do? What do you think? What do you think we should do if they say no, we're not going to give up our nuclear weapons? If you don't invest, we have no reason. And now they're talking. America wants them to get rid of it at once, but North Korea said they want a gradual decrease of nuclear weapons. So what do you say about that?
Well, it's very again, it's very difficult because we know that the North Koreans are historically untrustworthy when it comes to the promises that they make. Difficult to speculate what will happen. At the moment, we should be somewhat heartened in the fact that he's willing to talk to the North Koreans. So let's hope that he will put his nuclear weapons on the table in exchange for loosening sanctions, perhaps providing some humanitarian aid to help feed the people. It could be simply that after 3 generations of Kim rule in North Korea, that courtesies extended by the President of the United States will be sufficient to feed their egos, where they'll start operating like a normal country.
I just feel sorry for the North Korean people. They are suffering from this, from starvation.
Right.
There were like 3 million people. They died by starvation back in, I think, late 80s. And it's just, when I see the people there being oppressed, we never had a nation like North Korea who is in complete control over their people. And I just wish that this summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un would lead to prosperity, some kind of prosperity for the people there. I'm not talking about the government there, but the people there. But I don't know whether they want that. Because there has been some reports that North Korea, like Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il, has been purposely not giving them enough food to control them.
He is.
I'll give you the last one.
The Kim Jong-un, his father, his grandfather, they were brutal dictators. They exercised policies that were inhumane, and it certainly wouldn't surprise me that they would have killed their own people to maintain their personal control of that nation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's our show for today. Our show is not about left or right. It's about being right or wrong. To stay up to date with our latest videos, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thank you very much.
That's great.